Greetings, dear viewers. Welcome to our new episode. And today we have an interview and a discussion with David Icke. David Icke is an English writer, a public speaker, and a former football player and sports broadcaster. Mr. Icke is also well known in the conspiracy theorist sphere. David has written 23 books and has an audience of more than 100 million followers. David Icke claims that there is an interdimensional race of reptilian beings, the Archons, which have hijacked the Earth. Further, genetically modified humans, Archon hybrid race of reptilian shape shifters, the Babylonian Brotherhood, Illuminati or elite, manipulate events to keep humans in the fear so that the Archons can free off the resulting negative energy. He sees that the only way to defeat such archonic influence is for people to wake up to the truth and fill their hearts with love. Welcome, Mr. Icke.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, David, for accepting this invitation. And we'll dive in straight into the questions. So The first would be, do you remember how you became involved in researching all these so-called conspiracy theories, and what exactly interested you, what drove you, and tell us how you started?
I was, as you say, a footballer, and arthritis finished my career, and then I went into journalism and newspapers and radio and then television. I became a news and then a sports presenter for the BBC. Then I started getting concerned about what we were doing to the environment. I'm not talking about, the obsession today with human-caused global warming. I mean, I just saw places that I'd loved as a kid being destroyed and concreted over. So I got involved with the Green Party, and very, very quickly I became a national spokesman for the Green Party, bizarrely. Never set out to do that. And then during 1989, when we had the first decent, good election result with the Green Party at that time, I was starting to move into other ways of seeing the world, because whenever I was in a room alone, it seemed like I wasn't alone, that there was a presence there. And this went on throughout 1989, right into 1990. And long story short is I eventually met up with a professional psychic. I didn't tell her what was going on, but I wanted to know if she would pick up what I was feeling around me for the last year. And she then went into this psychic mode and told me that, which was kind of extraordinary to me at the time, March 1990, that I was going to go out on a world stage and reveal great secrets and lots of other things, all of which have happened. And that I would face enormous opposition, but, quote, they would always be there to protect me. And so from the moment I met her, my life became a synchronistic daily journey of walking into personal experiences, people, documents, whistleblowers, endlessly different sources of information that was painting a picture for me of, first of all, in the early years, that the people that we think are running the world, the presidents, the prime ministers, the politicians, are not actually doing so. The real controllers are in the shadows behind them, and that it's coordinated and goes back a very long time. And then towards like about 1996, when I was traveling America, I started to move into this, again, the synchronicity of information coming to me, to the fact that behind what I call the global cult, the network of secret societies that's really directing the world towards this ever more obvious global dystopia, was actually a non-human force. And so that took my focus for a number of years. And then just after the turn of the millennium, I had this overwhelming feeling that this reality we call human is actually a simulation. It's a virtual reality simulation, obviously, in principle, the same as a virtual reality game, but in actual technology, vastly, vastly more advanced. And at that time, when I started looking around and thinking, well, okay, I'm feeling this is a simulation, and that the limit of the simulation at this level, because there are others, is the speed of light. So does anyone else kind of think that, And at that time, I only found one other person. It was a professor at Oxford University called Nick Bostrom, who was postulating on the idea this could be a simulation, but the way he saw it was different to me. But what's happened since, as the years have passed, is that more and more mainstream scientists have started to conclude that actually, if you go down the road of what they call the simulation hypothesis, then these great mysteries of life and reality that can't be answered by the official version of reality can be answered by the simulation version. And in fact, just across the water where I live on a little island just off the south coast of England, in Portsmouth, which is where our ferries go into, at Portsmouth University, there was a physics professor, physics academic, who was in all the papers in Britain, because he said that his experiments, his studies, had led him to believe that this is actually a simulation, and it's based on information, which is exactly what I've been saying since the turn of the millennium. And interestingly, in April of 2021, the best part of 20 years after I started talking about the simulation, there was an article in Scientific American, a kind of mainstream scientific journal in America, in which an academic said that he concluded that this is a simulation and that the limit of the simulation is the speed of light, which is why the speed of light appears to be the fastest speed. It's actually not, but it appears to be if you look at it from a certain angle. So what I've been doing all these years, since 1990, is researching this vast, vast spectrum of information and subjects and putting the pieces together to form a whole. And, obviously I've had enormous ridicule over the years for what I've said, but not even a fraction of that now. Still some people that don't know what I'm saying or don't know anything about the world, but because of what has happened in the world in terms of the way society has changed, which this is what I said was coming, and also how in terms of the simulation and even the non-human force, people in greater numbers have looked at the world and realized that what's happening is actually an anti-human agenda. They are seeking to hijack and control all the basic survival mechanisms of humans. They want to control the food and the food supply. They want to control the water. They want to control the air even. They certainly want to control the atmosphere, which they're manipulating, and they want to control sources of energy. And the whole human-caused climate change hoax is to create an excuse to destroy the energy supplies that we have now, to vastly reduce the amount of energy that's available to the population. So it's been an amazing journey. I'm now in my 34th year of doing it, and it's opened up a world that in 1990 I never would have thought existed.
Wow, it's fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing your life path. Then the follow-up question would be, how do you see your mission today?
Well, as it's always been, which is to research what is happening and not have, this is the vital, not have a limit on where I will go. Because I look at what's called today the alternative media, and there wasn't an alternative media when I started out. It didn't exist. I've watched it appear. I've watched it grow, and it's been a great source of encouragement that it's grown, because it means more and more people are becoming aware of at least levels of the human plight. But what it's tended to do is focus on the five sense level of everything, of the world. Humans are overwhelmingly perceiving reality through the five senses, which is a tiny, tiny smear of the reality that we're experiencing. And, that's for two reasons, really. One is the people, a lot of the people are just like the population, five sense centric. If I can't see it, touch it, hear it, taste it, then it doesn't exist. And then another aspect of this is those that kind of do see that the five senses are only part of it. They think, well, if I go down the road that people would perceive as far out, well, maybe I will lose followers or lose credibility among the people that I have credibility with now. And what happened to me, because my life's been such a synchronistic experience, right from the start as I look back, is that I in 1990, 91, particularly 91 onwards, went through enormous levels of public ridicule, because I was a well-known person because of my work on mainstream national television in Britain. And that enormous ridicule set me free. I have this phrase that life so often gives you your greatest gifts, brilliantly disguised as your worst nightmare. And that was certainly true with the ridicule, because it cleared me out of the fear that most people live in, which is the fear of what other people think and the fear of how other people see them. And I didn't know at the time, but I was going to, in the years that followed, be talking about extraordinarily far out things compared with the perceived normal of daily life. And if I had still had this concern about how other people saw me, then there was a very good chance that I was going to start editing myself and thinking, I think this is happening, but I can't say so because they'll think I'm crazy. I don't have that filter. I don't have that self-censorship, because I don't care what people think of me. I care about what's happening and uncovering what's happening. That's all I really am focused on. So I go deeper and deeper in the rabbit hole. I've got a new book out called The Dream, which goes massively deep in the rabbit hole and is full of apparently far out things. But actually, science, or at least the cutting edge of science, mainstream science is asleep. But the cutting edge of science is ticking off things I've written about and explained in terms of this is how reality works. They're starting to see the if you like, the scientific explanations increasingly for how what I'm saying could happen, could be how it is. But what it turns out, which is why I got more and more credibility and more people are looking at my work, is because it's turned out to be true. Even the far out stuff is now being confirmed more and more and more. So we're entering a fantastic period now where we are going to understand reality, personal identity, who we are, where we are, in a way that we've never seen before, certainly in known human history. And so my role is to keep uncovering that, uncovering it, and communicating it, because what I'm not trying to do is convince anybody that it's true. If what I say has validity, it will be shown to be so by events and by what happens. So the last thing this world needs is someone else standing up and saying, I've got all the answers, you must listen to me. Because we're drowning in those people, and we have been throughout known human history. What I'm saying is here is a whole new way of looking at the world, life, world events, and then you make of it what you will. And that's all I do. And it's been very effective, especially in recent years.
Yes, thank you, David. And thank you for all your efforts and all the information that you've been putting out throughout all these years. The message, I think, reached a lot of people. And thank you for also your courage delivering this. And, as part of this project, Kaleidoscope of Facts, we've been researching the topic of human sacrifice, and we know that you also have researched this issue extensively. So I would greatly appreciate if you could share with our viewers what you've been able to uncover. And the first question in this regard would be, so through your research activities, what have you learned about the history of human sacrifice and cannibalism, and why did you decide to research this topic in the first place?
I'm getting information about that subject from all angles. And it was the same with human sacrifice and what we call Satanism. It came into my life, into my research, and then bang, was coming from all angles. And what I'm doing is taking apparently unconnected situations, unconnected information, and I'm forming it together into a tapestry, a whole. So you can't talk about human sacrifice without talking about the non-human element to it. You can't talk about that without talking about reality and how it really works, and why we live in a simulation, and what's created the simulation. All these dots have to come together to truly explain a human sacrifice. So it became clear to me as my research unfolded that not only is this reality manipulated from the unseen by a non-human force, a non-human race, species, whatever, in fact, multiple species. But these non-human entities feed off human energy. But it's a particular type of energy. It's low vibrational, emotional, and thought, mental energy. So, and this is mainstream science. Every time we feel an emotion or have a thought, we're giving off frequencies. And the nature of the frequency relates to the nature of the thought. So fear, which is the big controlling mechanism of the human population, is and offshoots of fear like anxiety, depression, resentment, regret, hatred, all these things. They are low, slow frequencies, whereas joy and love are high frequencies. And so the nature of this non-human force, which operates just outside the hidden, just outside the scene, rather, in the hidden. And just to make it clear, because this fact should be communicated to all children at the earliest age that they can grasp it. And that is when we look through our eyes, or think we do, we are not seeing everything that exists in the space we're looking at. What we're seeing is a narrow, laughably narrow band of frequency called visible light. So let's put that into perspective, because when you talk about the unseen, people say, well, where's the unseen then? Because I can see everything there is to see. Well, actually, you can't. You can hardly see anything. According to mainstream science, the electromagnetic spectrum, which is basically our reality, our experienced reality, is 0.005% of what exists in the universe in terms of energy in all its forms. And visible light, which is the only band of frequency that we can see, unless you have psychic abilities, the only band of frequency you can see with our sight senses is visible light, and that is a fraction of the 0.005%. So humans can basically see nothing, just this narrow band of frequency. So the idea that there are entities operating outside of that band, which are manipulating our reality within that band through this global cult, is not too much of a stretch, to say the least, once you realize the narrow band that we can actually see. So these entities, by their very nature, their desire to control, their desire to impose, their desire to manipulate, they are in a low frequency state. Because if they were in a high frequency state, an expanded consciousness state, they wouldn't want to do any of that. They're psychopaths, which is a very low frequency state. So if they're going to feed off human energy, human emotional and mental energy, then they have to manipulate humans to produce energy within the band of frequency that they can absorb. Otherwise, like radio stations on different wavelengths, they can't absorb it. So this virtual reality simulation that I talk about, and more scientists talk about, has been created to entrap our perception of reality and our perception of self, and to be manipulated so that the human population is in a constant state of fear, anxiety, depression. The more wars and suffering and deprivation you can have, the better. They're not bothered why we fear things as long as we do, because then we're giving off that energy. And so we have to be manipulated into these low frequency states. And that's why the world is as it is. That's why if you have a conversation with people anywhere in the world and you say, do you want a war? They'd say, oh, no. The vast majority will say, no, we don't want a war. So why do we have them one after the other, after the other, after the other? Because they're manipulated to happen by this global cult that represents in our reality this non-human force. So let's take that background and come round to human sacrifice. I noted, first of all, that the ancients used to sacrifice people, not least children. There's a reason for that as well. Openly, often openly, because it was kind of acceptable to them. And it was done as an offering to the gods. So my question then was, okay, so who are these gods? And then as I'm researching the rich and famous of the global cult, many of which appear on the television all the time, I started to realize that there was a common theme between them, and that was Satanism and pedophilia, because those two are connected. And so why do they get involved in that? Because they're psychopaths and they're stupid because they're psychopaths, but then they are not going to worship, quote, gods in their satanic rituals that don't exist. They're not. And then of course, the obvious thing starts to occur to you that the gods of the ancient world, to which they were sacrificing people as an offering to the gods, were actually the same gods that these people are worshipping today in their satanic rituals. And I've talked to people who have taken part in satanic rituals all over the world who have confirmed this. And so there came a point where human sacrifice was no longer acceptable. And it went from being openly done to being secretly done, which it is today. And then you look around the world and you see all these different pantheons of gods, all these different cultures and backgrounds. They have different versions of the gods. And you realize they're actually all the same gods, like the Greek pantheon and all this. My next question was, okay, they're making an offering, a sacrifice offering to the gods, but why? What do the gods get out of this? And then you realize, again, you've got to connect the dots to put the picture together, that what they do in these rituals is, and this is why even today they're following the same ritualistic patterns and sequences that you would have seen you would have had in Babylon and Egypt and the ancient world. Because what they're doing is they are creating terror in the victim, building up the terror so they get maximum terror from the victim. And what that terror is an extremely powerful, low vibrational energy being projected. And, when someone's, for instance, in an emotional state, you can see with their body language the kind of emotional experience they're having, like they might scream or whatever. So you can see in the body language. If you are sensitive to energy, you can feel those frequencies and coming off them, and you can gather on another level how they're feeling. But you can't see the frequencies. You can't see them. And the reason you can't see them is because they're outside of our human perception. They're going into this astral dimension. That's where these frequencies are actually going. And that's where these entities are feeding off the terror coming off the victim. And this is how it becomes an offering to the gods, because they're feeding off that terror. And what then happens is in the human level, if you like, that terror frequency creates a chemical change in the body, which releases adrenaline into the blood. And the Satanists who are taking part in the ritual, interacting with their gods, making the offering to their gods, they then drink the blood, which contains this adrenaline. This is where these references to adrenochrome come from. It's like a drug to these people, because they're crazy. And so you've got this double experience, if you like, where the astral, quote, gods, who are plasma in nature, they are absorbing the frequencies of terror, and the Satanists actually in the ritual, in this reality, are drinking the chemical reaction to the terror. And that's what it's all about. And I met a wonderful man called Credo Mutwa, who he died well into his 90s. I spent long hours with him, days with him over the years in South Africa. And he was the Zulu historian and a high Zulu shaman. And they have the same legends and accounts about the unseen gods, as I've found all over the world. But what he told me is that human sacrifice and cannibalism was introduced to human society way back, obviously, by these entities, which can enter what we call visible light, so people could see them, but it's very rare because obviously they want to remain hidden.
Thank you so much for sharing. It's very interesting to listen to you and your, your logical way and how you evolve by researching and went through this. It makes so much sense. And then would be a question, like in today's world, as you mentioned, that it's some kind of addiction. But in today's world, as many millennia ago, sacrifices are still performed in the society. Why does this inhumane act exist? And in your opinion, what drives those who still participate in it? Is it only the addiction, or is it something else?
This global cult, as I call it, is a network of secret societies. If people could just imagine a web around the world, and each strand in the web is a secret society. And you have what I call the spider at the center of the web, which is this non-human force in the hidden. And it's driving the direction of human society towards greater and greater dystopia and control. Controlled by these entities, ultimately. And so the inner core, those that know, because all these secret societies are compartmentalized. So only the people in the upper levels know what's going on. The rest are kept in the dark of it. You only progress into that level if you're considered safe, where you go up the degrees. Those that know are literally worshipping these gods, and they are representing these gods in terms of what these entities want human society to be. So the satanic rituals are these people worshipping these entities, literally. And I know from talking to people who've been part of this in different parts of the world, that these rich and famous Satanists are terrified of these gods. They serve them slavishly. And so when you see them on CNN or, on the media in general worldwide, saying the world must do this, we must do that, we must do the other. And so they're serving the gods both in satanic ritual worship and sacrifice, and also they're serving them in their daily lives by manipulating the world into the direction that these entities want it to go. I've been warning about this for 20, 25 years, of a hive mind, which will be centrally dictated. So if you imagine a vast array of computers connected to a central computer, and the central computer, through those connections, is dictating what all the other computers do, what they put on the screen, all of it. that's the goal. And so few people can see that because you have to research so many different subjects over such a long time. And as we are moving closer and closer to their end goal, what they want, it's becoming more and more obvious that that is what is going on.
Yes, thank you for the explanation. And it's true, we need to zoom out to see the whole picture, as you've been saying this quite often.
That's an interesting point you make there, actually, very interesting point. Because what I've been looking at is even people at the cutting edge of science who've been asking questions about how reality works. What they've done and what they do is they go bottom up. They'll look at a phenomenon, whatever it is, plasma, electromagnetism, whatever, and they'll try to work out how it fits in. Then they'll look here and they'll see this and they'll try to work out how it fits in. But if you go top down instead of bottom up, you see that what we're living in is a gigantic, well beyond anything we perceive as a computer, by the way, but in our language, a gigantic computer system generating this simulation. And once you realize it's a simulation and how it works, then the different parts it becomes obvious how they fit in and why they are as they are. For instance, if you were looking inside a computer and you didn't know it was a computer, you might look at the central processing unit chip. You might look at this motherboard or parts of the motherboard, not seeing it as a motherboard. And you might look at this and what have you. And you try to work out, so how does that work? But once you realize it's a freaking computer, it becomes obvious how the different parts play a part in the computer.
Yeah, and also, as you said, well, once you know the destination, you can kind of understand how we are going there.
Yeah.
Coming back to Credo Mutma, we know that, so we spent some time talking with him, and he told you that this story that 25,000 years ago, some Chitauri aliens took over our land and enslaved humans. Why do you think they succeeded?
We are decoding the simulation. You put into perspective the big picture and then the little picture, like non-human entities entering our reality and what have you, manipulating and then leaving. You have to put that into its real context, which is quite small compared with the big picture. And one of the things that I write about at some length in the dream is that I asked the question, what is this simulation? And it's not a construct. It's not a physical construct. There is no physical. That's part of the illusion. It's an information field. And if people think of a Wi-Fi field, they've basically got the symbolism perfect. Because if I said to people that there was a field of information in this room, for instance, which you could tap into anywhere in the world and create on the screen of a computer a reality that's global, then if people didn't know about computers and didn't know about Wi-Fi, they'd say you were crazy. That's not possible. They'd say, where is the Wi-Fi field? I can't see it, or we can see almost nothing. So if people think of this simulation, quote, matrix, as some people call it, as a field of information, And we are decoding that information into the reality that we're experiencing, or think we are. So how do we do that? Well, since the 1990s, I've been referring to the human body as a biological computer. And the more I've understood as the years have passed, and increasingly so when I was writing The Dream, this human body is decoding the matrix, which is why when you hear these accounts of near-death experiences, when they leave the body, their consciousness leaves the body, they experience a completely different reality to this one. Why? Because what's been decoding this one as their perception of the world has ceased to function and is no longer decoding it. And so they're now experiencing a very different reality. And one of the things that's really obvious to me is that this technological, quote, revolution that's happening with AI and computerization of everything, it's mimicking technologically the reality that we're experiencing and how we experience it. It's a technological mimicking of it. So if we take that Wi-Fi field and a computer, what the computer's doing is tapping into the Wi-Fi field. And if you said to people, tell me about the internet, they'd say that it was videos and graphics and words on the computer screen. Okay, yes, it is, but only on the screen. The internet exists in that form only on the screen. Everywhere else, it's a radiation field or it's electronic circuits. And what the computer's doing is taking information, which it's programmed to take by the operator. It's taking information from the field in terms of Wi-Fi, and it's putting it on the screen in a totally different form. And that is exactly how we are experiencing this reality. This is mainstream science. What the five senses do is connect into the what I would call the simulation through frequency, wave field, waveform. So if you think of the ears, the ears are picking up sound waves, turning them into electrical information, communicate it to the brain, and the brain decodes that electrical information into the sounds that we think we hear. So that's obvious with the ears, but all the five senses operate in the same way. They tap into frequency information, they turn it into electrical information, it's communicated to the brain, and then there's different parts of the brain that specialize in decoding the different senses, and then the brain puts together that information into a sense of reality. And it's actually a holographic digital reality, not a physical reality. And it appears as we decode it and experience it, that the world is outside of us. It's not, it's in here. If you think about a computer, where is the internet in relation to a computer? Well, it's not here, it's not here, it's not here. It's inside the computer. As I'm looking at you now, you are inside the computer. You are being decoded inside the computer, and I'm seeing you on the screen from inside the computer. Our reality, the way we experience it, we are decoding the wave field matrix, simulation field, into electrical information, and then it's becoming digital holographic information in here, which we experience as out there. And so that is the big picture within which everything is happening. So just as in the Matrix movies, they didn't go into the Matrix physically. They went into the Matrix with their minds. They put that probe in the back of the neck and they went into the matrix with their mind. And that's basically what's happening. This is a mind manipulation, perceptual manipulation trap that we are experiencing. And the Matrix movie series, particularly the first one, was a wonderful visual expression of actually the reality that we're experiencing. And I remember the Morpheus character at one point held up a battery, and he said the Matrix is a computer-generated dream world designed to turn humans into one of these, a battery. And that was such a profound truth within an apparently fictional movie, because that's what's happening. We're being manipulated to generate this low vibrational energy, particularly emotion, which these entities are feeding off. And if you again look at the symbolism of the Matrix, where you had all those babies and the machines were getting their power from the energy given off by the babies, right? So, I mean, they're kind of putting it in front of your face as a fictional movie, when actually they're putting the truth in front of you, really. So just very quickly, that thing about entities coming in and what have you and manipulating, well, it's all going on in here. When those entities from outside of human sight come into our reality and manipulate, they're coming into here. That's what they're coming into, the reality that we're experiencing, that we are decoding. And it's a completely different way of looking at the world. For instance, we think of distance. So you look into the night sky and you see apparently a vast distance, and people talk about millions of light years, even billions of light years. But actually what you're looking at in the form that you think you're looking at is all going on in here. So where's the distance anymore? It's all illusory. Time is an illusion of the Matrix as well. And what it does collectively is completely hijack our perception of reality. So you can have at the human level all this censorship going on, because if you're going to control billions of people, you have to control them perceptually. You can't just, well, you can if you connect them to AI and the AI thinks for them, but until then, you can't force billions of people to do something. You've got to get them to decide to do it, or think, I don't want to do it, but I better do it, because what are the consequences of not doing it? That's you have to manipulate people perceptually so that they will act the way that suits your agenda. And so we get our perceptions of reality, from which comes our behavior, from the information we receive. It might be a personal experience. It might be something on the news, something on the internet. In other words, it's information. And what this censorship is about, increasingly hysterical censorship, is controlling the information that we receive, through which we form our perceptions. So our perceptions are dictated by the information, and then from the perception comes our behavior. But what I've been trying to get across over the years is that the control of perception is massively more expanded and detailed than that. The very reality that we're experiencing, the very nature of who we think we are, it's all fake to control us and to impact upon our perception of reality, thus our behavior.
Yes, thank you so much. And may we shift a little bit to another question? Originally, people believed that God was the mother, a woman, the great mother goddess, and she was not in heaven at all. With the coming of Chitoari, there was a substitution, and God became a man, dwelling exactly in the heavenness. It was the form, that moment, that magic and the institution of the priesthood came into being. How do priests hold their power over people for so long?
It's a very limited trap. And beyond it, beyond the wall, its frequency walls, which this is designed to interact with, is infinite reality, infinite possibility, infinite potential. And in those higher expanded realms of awareness, there is no male, female, negative, positive. It's like it's a whole. It's like everything's together. What they've created within this simulation is duality. Why? Because at the level that we're experiencing the simulation, the foundation of it is electrical and electromagnetic. And electricity requires polarities. So within the simulation, the wholeness, the oneness that exists outside gets pulled into constituent parts, illusory constituent parts. And so you have the male, female, and negative, positive, what have you. And so what happens in the simulation is not an expression of what happens beyond it. When actually the balance of the two is what goes on beyond the simulation, but they don't want that. Wholeness, oneness starts to reconnect you to out there. They don't want that. They've got to keep people apart. And this is why, when people say we must resist the government and we must fight the government, no, we mustn't. We must cease to cooperate with it. If we fight it, if we resist it, what are we doing? We're setting up polarities with the government, with the authorities. They seek to impose, you seek to resist. There you go. You've got an electrical circuit. But if you don't resist and fight them, you simply don't cooperate, suddenly the polarity becomes one hand clapping because you're not playing their game. It's not, I'm going to fight you. It's saying, I'm not going to do what you want. I'm not doing it. And you break the circuit. And so they're very, very, this cult and its demonic overlords are very, very happy as, like, what's happening in Israel now is classic. I'll give you, it's a wonderful example, tragic as it is. You've got the Israeli people and you've got the Palestinian people, right? Now, they could come together and live in harmony. They could. It's a choice. That's all it is. It's a choice. But they're manipulated to fear each other and to hate each other, basically. And therefore, there's polarities. But this part of the polarity is the polarity because of the actions of the Israeli government and military and authorities. And the Gazan people are a polarity to that because of Hamas. But if you do the research, and it don't take much in terms of Hamas, you find that Hamas was created and funded into existence by the Israeli government. So what you've got, if you go one step up into the shadows from the Israeli government and one step up from Hamas, you've got the same hands holding the strings of both. And through those manipulated polarities, you've got these two groups of people fighting each other, hating each other, all the rest of it. And so you've got an electrical circuit between the two, which generates what? What is being generated in Gaza? What has been generated in Israel in the last week, 2 weeks? Low vibrational, emotional, mental energy. To these entities, it's lunch. And it's a wonderful example of how they manipulate events and polarities to generate the energy which they feed off.
Thank you. Exactly. And this is the whole thing with what you resist only becomes stronger, but this problem, reaction, and solution are also being pushed onto
I have
people.
a phrase I've been using for years: what you fight, you become.
Yeah.
And there's so much evidence of it. You've got the Israeli government, for instance, saying that the Hamas attacks were brutal and they killed children and all the rest of it. All of it true. All of it was horrific, right? Okay, we might argue about some of the detail and whether, this happened or that happened, but it was horrific taken as a whole. But then they bomb the children of Gaza, and so what you fight, you become. I remember in the 1970s, there was a far-right political group in Britain called the National Front. And when they did marches, there were marches by what were called the Anti-Nazi League in the same area as the National Front. Again, polarities. And I talked to a police officer some years later who was policing that. And he said to me, if it weren't for the banners, you wouldn't tell one side from the other, right? What you fight, you become. It's not about fighting, it's about ceasing to cooperate.
Yes, exactly. And I wanted also to come back again to the African legends. And, African people, they talk about the fact that humans were taught to be afraid. So the more fear a person feels, the easier it is to control them.
Which is another step down the rabbit hole that I write about in the dream. And that is, what is the human mind? Because I would look at these different spiritual ways of doing things, different spiritual expressions, particularly in the East, but not only. The kind of old New Age arena which is the kind of East gone West, has the same principles. And it is this: if you're going to reach a state of enlightenment, you have to go beyond your mind. You have to get beyond mind. Mind is a block to enlightenment. So my question was, so what's the mind? What is this mind you have to get beyond? And what I've concluded in the dream is that the human mind is AI. It's not AI, human created AI. It's demonically created AI in the astral realm, which is vastly, vastly more advanced than AI that we know. Even now, we think it's advanced. It's the Stone Age compared with what is possible in the astral, because AI is running the whole simulation. It's not people pressing buttons. It's run by AI. It's a self-perpetuating system.
So it really shows that the more you open up your heart to the world, you become more curious and open to new information. You actually find it, right? And you become not a feeder by somebody, but actually you're feeding everybody else with your, let's say, energy around yourself, right? Because sometimes some people might think that you're crazy, but at the same time they feel this energy that you're different, and sometimes they really enjoy being next to you because you're different, right?
Some people do, and some people are frightened of different because their perception. See, this is an interesting area. we have two hemispheres of the brain, the right brain, the left brain, with a corpus callosum bridge connecting them. And most of humanity is in the left side of the brain. It's dominated by the left side of the brain. And I saw a really great interview with a psychiatrist called McGilchrist, who was seeing things beyond the normal psychiatric level of seeing things, where they basically don't know what they're doing. But he was much more aware. And he introduced an element which is so important to understanding the human perception. And that is the left brain's need for certainty. That is such a key element in understanding human behavior and why people react as they do. So the right brain is much more at home, in fact, loves uncertainty and just exploring. And, it gets bored with certainty. It wants to explore. Whereas the left brain wants certainty. And this shows itself like, when people follow religions, they follow them rigidly, even though, there's flaws galore in them. There's some good stuff in them you can get out of it, but there's massive flaws. But they follow the package because it gives them certainty. It's an explanation of reality that gives them certainty. If I'm good, then God will look on me nicely. And then you have science, which is supposed to be the opposite of religion. Actually, it is its own religion. And that is looking for certainty. This is why, it's one reason, there are others, but it's one reason why the scientific mainstream resists, and has done throughout its existence. It resists anything that rewrites what it believes. So if you look at a religion, it resists anything that questions what it says, because what you're questioning is the sense of certainty that it wants, the left side of the brain wants. And then you've got the certainty of mainstream science. And you've got all these other scientists who, they're looking for how things are rather than being controlled by a desire for certainty. And mainstream science resists them. It will demonize them. It will shut them off and marginalize them because it's challenging their certainty. And if you look at great scientific discoveries that have taken us forward, the scientific mainstream has had to be pulled kicking and screaming into that to the point where it has to be so overwhelming, the evidence, that they can't resist it anymore. And I'm just reading this book at the moment, or I've just finished it actually. And it's looking at these different scientists who've discovered certain things. And invariably, they went through that process. They were marginalized and demonized and often proved right long after they died, when during their lives they were ridiculed by the scientific mainstream and turned out to be right.
Yes, indeed. And then our last question would be, what motivates you to continue your research and bring the truth that you have discovered to people and that you will be discovering still to people?
Yeah, I'm going to just go on. I mean, my new book, The Dream, is out and I'm already starting to form the next one because, it's an interesting point. What has driven me over the years is something that Socrates, the ancient Greek philosopher, is quoted as saying, which is to know is to know that you know nothing. That is true knowledge. And, when you go back to what I said earlier about this fraction of 0.005% of the universe claimed by mainstream science that we can see. Everything within that is all that we can see. Then it's obvious that there's one thing that can't be challenged, and that is whatever we know or think we know, there's always more to know. Always more to know. There has to be. You've got infinity, but that's where the answers lie, and so that's what I pursue, and I'll go on pursuing it, because I know whatever I think I know there's always more to know.
Oli, thank you very much. Thanks again for accepting this invitation and sharing your wisdom. It was really a pleasure.
Thank you. Been great to talk to you.
Yes.
See ya.
Thanks again, David.
Bye. Nice talking to you. Bye.
Bye-bye.